So I've planted a small orchard, which with the intention of it becoming a forest garden eventually. So using shrubs like sea buckthorn, which is a really productive nitrogen-fixing shrub, produces an orange berry that's really high in antioxidants and vitamin C. They call it the citrus of the north. And it'll provide nitrogen for some of the shrubs and trees that are planted around. So we have heartnut trees, there's some plum trees in here, there's some chums, which are hybrids of cherry and plum. And I've spaced these out wide enough to get light between the trees so that I can plant up the lower layers eventually. So I'm going to be killing off the lawn in a series of stages and planting gardens beneath the trees. So the trees will form the canopy, and I'll have shrubs and vines and ground covers and tubers underground. So this will all become a very productive forest garden in time. I was lucky enough to have a few mature apple trees on the property, below which we've planted some shade gardens. There are a lot of shade-loving edibles that are pretty easy to cultivate in Ontario. One really common one is the hosta, the ubiquitous hosta, which is in every shade garden from here to Sarnia. And hostas are not generally known as being edible unless you're in Japan, where you can find them in the supermarkets in the spring. The leaves, when they emerge from the soil, they're like tightly curled spears, and you can cut them all off a hosta and it will grow more. So you get one harvest off each plant. You take those curled spears and toss them in olive oil, and then roast them in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes, a little butter, a little salt and pepper, and they're delicious. Everybody should eat their hostas. They're really very nice and really easy to grow. And they make excellent ground covers, which is one of the reasons they're so popular. Another one to grow in a shade garden is honewort. This is honewort. It's related to the Japanese mitsuba, which is used as a vegetable in Japan, but it's virtually unknown as a vegetable here, and yet it's just as delicious and a little more productive because it's a larger plant. Honewort, it's the young greens in the spring, again, that you use, and generally you cook it. You can't eat it raw. It's nice raw. It's even better cooked. Just lightly cooked. You can use it in soups and stews or as a side vegetable. And it's native to here, and it's very, very easy to grow if you have some shade. And then this is a little Caucasian spinach, which we're trying to spread around the garden just as much as possible. It's one of the nicest greens for fresh eating. I have wanted to build a little cabin for years for the woofers and interns who help me out here. And so I used a lot of the old barn material. There was an old barn that was falling down when I got the place. And so I used a lot of the material to build this little cabin. Most of the deck and all the interior trim came from the barn. And then some of the framework and the siding for the cabin all came from a local log home builder in Eugenia who just has a pile of this material. It's scrap material for him. So the siding for the cabin cost me a case of beer. And the cabin itself is 9 by 12 with bunk beds pushed out the back. Let's check it inside. Years ago, I saw a great solar shower at Everdale Environmental Learning Center, and I've wanted to build one ever since, and finally did this year. So this is a hot water solar panel that's connected to a regular insulated hot water tank that I got from a plumber friend of mine who was taking it out of somebody's basement. And so the hot water in the panel heats up with the sun, and hot water rises just as hot air does. So the hot water rises up into the tank, displacing the cold water back into the panel. So it sets up a thermosiphon loop, which heats up the entire tank full of hot water. So we built a shower off the back of our woodshed, and so that takes a lot of the pressure off our domestic hot water system. This is our shower. I wanted to experiment with wattle. I think wattle is a beautiful building technique, so we harvested a bunch of ash trees from the property and used some old barn material to build the structure for the privacy of the shower. And so we wove this ash material, and now we can have showers outside. I personally learn best by reading. I love having books on hand because I don't retain all the information, so I can always go back to the books. So some of my favorite books I sell now through the nursery. These are all foraging books by the best foraging writer around, Samuel Thayer. He's written 3 books now, The Forager's Harvest, Nature's Garden, and Incredible Wild Edibles. And he's a wonderful writer. He's very engaging, goes into great detail about every plant that he covers, and he's really inspiring to read as well. So I encourage everybody to check out Samuel Thayer. He's wonderful. He also has a store where you can buy wild edibles from his area online. He processes them into preserves and such. And then Martin Crawford is one of my favorite permaculture writers. He is the director of the Agroforestry Research Trust in England, and created and tended to a 2-acre edible forest garden in England before writing the book. He had this garden for 20 years before writing this. And so this is essentially my Bible now. So Martin Crawford, I recommend that everybody check him out on YouTube. He does tours of his forest garden, and he everything comes from first-hand experience as well as really good research. So he's a great writer. And then Eric Toensmeyer is another of my favorites. He's written a number of books. The very first book on perennial vegetables, and he's written a number of other wonderful books on permaculture, including a great one called The Carbon Farming Solution, where he details all of the methods of farming while sequestering carbon in the soil, which is a great one. I don't sell that one, but it's available online.